Hello everyone, welcome to the GCI Summit 2021. Very sorry not to be seeing you all in person, but thank you very much, Jonathan and team, for inviting me back to speak. My name is Tim Phillips. I'm from CBD Intel, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the CBD market generally, but also what's happening and what do we think is going to be the market structure coming up over the next few years. So there's lots going on, both from a regulatory perspective and a market perspective, and I'm going to dig into some of that. Quick few words about CBD Intel. We've been going for just over three and a bit years now. We have a team of analysts here in Barcelona and an office in London. We're effectively an independent data source for the CBD sector. So we very much specialize in consumer CBD. That means that we are looking at medical and recreational cannabis because it's really relevant to the way that the consumer CBD market is growing. But we focus very much on CBD and consumer CBD markets. And of course, that's of huge importance, particularly outside North America. So, and just also briefly to mention that we have a team of lawyers who are tracking the regulations, incredibly important to understand the way that the regulatory environment and landscape is changing. That has a massive impact on what the market analysis team is doing, which is trying to figure out this very fragmented, very changeable market and try to understand both what consumers are doing in that sector and also what brands and products are being sold and some competitor analysis. So hopefully I'll show some of that to you today. What are we talking about today? Well, we're focused on really what's been going on recently. So let's kind of look a little bit back on 2020, what's happened, what are the main themes running through this, and then what's coming through in 2021. What are we seeing in terms of products in the market? I'm going to focus a bit on some of the European markets. We'll talk very much about things like Delta 8 as a phenomenon in the US, very important. I'll have a few slides on a consumer survey we did earlier this year on consumer habits in the CBD space. I will touch on regulation on novel food. There are other speakers I know that are focused on novel food, so I won't go into too much detail, but I'll mention it in the context of how we think it's going to affect the market going forwards. And then just finish up with a few words on what the growth of the sector is likely to be over the next few years. So what has been happening, and I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but let's just kind of review what happened in 2020. One of the biggest things, of course, is COVID and the impact that had, particularly on retail. For every sector, of course, massively impacted, but I think particularly for CBD and particularly for CBD dedicated stores, retail offline stores, which were not deemed to be essential services clearly. So a lot of those shut during lockdown, and we did see a shift to online retail. Online retail was already really important in CBD space in many countries. And it's in a way been boosted by a lot of the lockdown. We've seen offline retail come back, and I think offline retail is going to continue to become more and more important as CBD moves into the mainstream. But I think that it's definitely had a shift because of COVID-19. Continued innovation by that, I think we're still seeing many new brands and new products come into the market. So that's very much the sign of a vibrant sector, that there are plenty of new types of products coming in, and we'll talk a little bit about the types of new formats as well. But just on the face of it, there are definitely lots of new products coming through. Regulatory, and I suppose a lot of our work is tracking this regulatory change, and as I said, it's really, really crucial for this sector. It's a controversial sector. It's very connected to cannabis and all the issues that go around cannabis regulation, so incredibly important. But some of the big things that happened and are continuing to happen, novel food is the most obvious one. I think that was the big story really of last year, and of course the deadline for applications for novel food approval in the UK has just passed at the end of March. We're yet to see really where that's going. We've had a number of products that have been validated. That's kind of stage one of the process, but it doesn't mean that those products are going to end up being approved at the end. But we've definitely also seen that the UK are leaders in this regulatory process, and I think that's really interesting. There's been a lot of criticism, I guess, of regulation of this new sector, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty from the companies in the sector. But I think we've seen a number of sectors different to CBD that have moved from a kind of unregulated to a regulated sector, and I don't think that this is unusual, and I think that the process that's being gone through by the FSA is going to work. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. I also think that what's happened in the UK is going to have a big impact on the speed with which the European Union and the European Commission in particular starts to approve novel food products in mainland Europe. So I think it's a very positive sign. One of the other things to mention around regulations that we've seen in other sectors is that it generally has a really positive impact on growth in the sector. And what's really needed, as we know in CBD at the moment, is to regain some consumer confidence in the category, to get some trust back into the category. And I think this regulatory environment will provide that. So we're pretty optimistic about the impacts of regulation, particularly around novel food. We've got lots of other areas of regulation that are perhaps a little less important, just because particularly vape and cosmetics are have different regulatory environments completely. Vape is going through a change. I suspect that it will be included. CBD as a vape inhaled product will probably be included in the new negotiation of the Tobacco Products Directive. It will be certainly going to include loose hemp flour that is sold in a number of European markets and is actually taxed in a number of markets as well. So that's something that we've seen as a change which came through in 2020. But so both vape and kind of loose flour is likely to be included within some new regulatory environments relatively soon on the European level. Cosmetics, well, we had the Canavate case, really important case. We still haven't seen the full impact of that ruling yet at the European Court. I think what's very interesting, though, is it's immediately changed the regulatory landscape for cosmetics, and we've seen a real boost in topicals and cosmetics, probably as a result of that. The regulatory environment now for cosmetics using plant-derived CBD is clear. And we're seeing, as a result, a number of bigger brands look at CBD as an ingredient in topical products. So I think that's very positive. And as you can see there, in that next bullet point, we're talking about growth in topicals. That's certainly an area that we saw start in 2020 and is continuing into this year. In terms of other products, as I said, flour has become a big thing in some markets, and it will continue to grow, I think. I suspect that it will also get more consistent regulation around Europe. So we'll start to see that come through. It won't be in the UK, but it certainly will be in other European markets. For North American markets, clearly very different setup, and the way that dispensaries are dealing with low THC hemp flour is very different. I think the other thing that I mentioned at the start, so Delta 8 is really an important element of the CBD market in the US. My personal view is I don't think it'll be allowed to continue as it is right now. It's being sold all over the place, particularly in retail in states without cannabis regulation. And I think that situation both is potentially really damaging for CBD, but also I very much doubt that it'll be allowed to continue for very much longer. It's almost certain that it'll be included within regulations, both at a state and potentially at a federal level, that are applied to all THC. So I think it's a slight anomaly. It shows the kind of ability of this sector to evolve and create new ideas. I think in the case of Delta 8, I think there are certainly some concerns. it's potentially a sort of a PR disaster for CBD waiting to happen. I hope it won't turn into that, but we'll see. Just finally on this slide, so we've had continued pricing pressure, so prices have come down. I've got some slides to show that, and as many of you will know, the wholesale price particularly for CBD isolate has continued to decline. We're seeing prices now down as low as kind of $200 a kilo. I think it's a reflection of the glut of hemp in many, particularly US regions. So we've got oversupply, and as a result, the prices are coming back down. So I think we're probably at rock bottom on the wholesale market. On the consumer side, I think prices are still coming down, but I suspect, given the new regulatory environment that we're starting to see, we're going to start to see more consolidation, and prices will probably stabilize a bit. Last bullet point, product diversification. So I've talked about some of these things. We've certainly talked about other cannabinoids, particularly Delta-8. Not a huge amount of interest in some of the other minor cannabinoids in the European markets, but I know that's something that's starting to creep through in the US. Active ingredients, so kind of functional ingredients added to CBD, very much is a phenomenon that happened in 2020 and is continuing. So we're seeing more and more products come through with added ingredients like melatonin, turmeric, and so on. And then I think the final points are more that the CBD market is becoming more specialized, and we're seeing more particular products that are designed for particular segments of consumers. Quite rightly, CBD, we need to understand, is an ingredient which will be put into a number of different formats, and it's inevitably going to kind of subdivide into the various different segments that it's aimed at. Okay, a few charts just to kind of, I suppose, show what I was talking about in the first slide, and just to kind of confirm some of this. So one of the first points, and quite positive, I suppose, is that we're continuing to see new products come into the market. So here is just looking at last year, actually, the products that came into the market in the UK compared to the ones that were taken off the market. And we're seeing obviously a net positive, particularly in oils, but in topicals and vape as well. We're seeing more products and more new products added to the market than are taken off the market. So that's a very kind of positive sign, I suppose. Similar story in Germany, same thing really. Oils and topicals very positive in terms of net positive adds to the range of products that are available to consumers. Pricing pressure, again, this is looking back a bit further. So this is looking back towards the second half of 2019, and then up to the end of last year, the second half of last year. And we're seeing price declines in all categories. And in fact, we're seeing some of these price declines accelerate, so particularly edibles, for example. The one exception to that is that flower prices have been going up in some cases. These are averages, by the way, across a number of countries. If you look at the bottom there, the countries we've used pricing from is UK, Germany, Greece, Switzerland, US. So it's trying to give a kind of general picture. And of course, if you look at any one of those countries individually, the same pattern comes through. But particularly, flour is very much a phenomenon that doesn't, for example, exist in the UK. So there's very little data in the UK, but it's something that is coming through quite strong in Switzerland and Greece, for example. So pricing is continuing to go down. As I said, I think that the price decline is going to slow as we start to move into a regulated environment where products are, well, I suspect that the competition will be higher, and there will be some consolidation given the number of products that are likely to get through novel food approval. Okay, again, another sort of set of slides just to show how vibrant the market still is. So this is the latest data that we've got for the UK. I thought I would just use that to really summarize what a vibrant market still is. So we've tracked over 8,000 products there. In terms of retail, we're still seeing the biggest kind of range of products appear in CBD specialist and vape specialist shops. So no surprise really, but those companies are really having a very wide range of products available to consumers. much less in when you get down to sort of supermarkets and pharmacies. And so whilst it's clear that supermarkets and pharmacies are obviously going to have a much smaller range, they tend to have a small number of retail deals with a small number of brands. I think there are opportunities as the segment moves into the mainstream to increase the number of products going through that channel. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I missed one. Novel food regulation, I think, just applies here in the sense that instead of looking at the total number of products, that 8,000 number, we're now looking at the number of brands in the UK. And again, this is the latest. So over 400 brands. And as you can see there, split between the different products on the left there, we've still got a huge number of those brands that are going to be subject to novel food. So novel food is going to have a massive impact on the UK market, as you can see. And we will see how many of those brands continue through and get through the process. We don't think we're going to see, the first approvals probably until next year now. So I think we'll have a year during 2021 where there's a bit of uncertainty, and there may well be some companies that pull out of the market depending on where they get to with the FSA. But anyway, hugely influential. The outcome of the novel food the novel food regulations will be very important. All right, just a couple of others just to show, I suppose, two areas that are of massive interest to the sector at the moment and to some extent to consumers. But I think these are really of interest just to show how, in terms of the range of products, we're still seeing these CBD specialists and vape specialists very, very important as a contributor to the number of brands that are available. So and interesting, I suppose, when you split down some of these edible products, if you just look at the CBD specialist column on the left, the various bars there, quite interesting to see in terms of edibles. The focus is very much on gummies and candies. We've got some other things coming through. I'm always surprised how little there is of things like chocolate in the UK market. So it's kind of interesting. And I think a lot of this is coming across from the US. Gummies is clearly a kind of a US form factor, which is being sort of exported everywhere. And there we are. It's a big important section of the edibles market. And then beverages. Looking at this, we've got a lot of teas, interestingly, and a lot of sodas. So a lot of cans of fizzy soda and kombucha and other things like that. So again, the split is very much following the format that I showed previously in terms of retail channels. But I think it's interesting to look at the different types of products that are coming through. And of course, both these two charts, just all of these products are subject to novel food. I don't need to make that point too clearly, do I? And it'll be I think it'll be very interesting to see how many of these get through. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about a UK survey. I'm just conscious of time. We did a survey at the end of last year, start of this year, I think. It was an online survey. This, I want to make clear, is not a fully representative sample of CBD consumers in the UK. These respondents tended to be enthusiast CBD users, regular users who have used CBD for plenty of time. So they don't tend to be new users. They tend to know what they want. They're using it quite often for pseudo medical reasons, whether that's pain relief, sleep, and so on. Just interesting, though, to look at this kind of group and to continue to look at them to see how it changes, because as we've seen in all the sectors that we look at, it's really important to understand what enthusiast consumers are doing. They will drive the market. They're a bellwether for where the sector's going. So here we have the sort of range of products that they're using, and of course this adds up to more than 100 in the sense that the consumers' respondents were potentially using more than one kind of product. But what's very clear is the sort of order of the products that are used. Oils are very clearly out in front. We've also got topicals and vapes coming through. And no surprise, I suppose, that things like flour are quite low in the UK simply because they're not available through mainstream retail there. So having said that, 13% of people are using flour. Clearly, they can't be buying that in a legal environment, but that's quite interesting. Okay. Purchase channel. Okay, so we had about 100 people respond, but only about 80 of these responded in terms of the purchase channel. And very clearly, online is hugely important to this group. So for an enthusiast group, online becomes very important. That's partly because of price, I suppose, that prices tend to be more competitive online, but it was also perhaps reflective of the position that we've all been in over the last few months in terms of lockdown and retail not being available, particularly in the UK. So I think this, again, is not representative of the position that might be once we open up. I think it over-represents online as a sales channel, but I think it's interesting to see how important that is. Last slide on the survey was just, we asked a number of questions about attitudes towards CBD, and I think none of these answers are particularly surprising, but I quite like the top question, which was like, how do these consumers see CBD? Do they see it any differently from vitamins and supplements? And the answer is that a lot of these respondents are using it in the same way as a supplement or vitamin, and that'll be important as to some things I'm going to come on to talk about in a moment. Clearly, the respondents thought that the CBD should be available in food products. That's fair enough. They're much less concerned than you might imagine about CBD being regulated, and I think that's a positive sign that regulation is going to fulfill some kind of need in the CBD market. So I think that's good. And then final 2 points around the fact that this group will get CBD pretty much irrespective of what the UK government does. And I think that's also fairly clear. Not surprising for an enthusiast group, but also important to understand that regulation has to work, because it needs to encourage people to enter the regulated market. Otherwise, people will just go elsewhere. Really important point. Okay, so novel food. I promised I wouldn't talk about novel food in any detail, but I think it is important just in terms of what we see happening. I think the main point to make on this is that we don't know yet how the FSA are going to consider products and applications that they've got in. We don't know how lenient that they are going to be in terms of the various different formats that they are getting applications on. But I think what is clear is that many regulators that we've talked to, both European Commission and FSA, the feeling we get is that they're starting to see CBD as a supplement style of product. And I think, given that we're dealing here with government scientists whose whole job is related to making sure that products that are allowed into the food chain are not a risk to human beings, I think that the likelihood is that some kind of a supplement style product, potentially a capsule or an oil with a very clear indication of how much should be used, I think those are far lower risk for a government food scientist to look at than a fizzy beverage that might be added to vodka in a nightclub, or chocolate bars or whatever that have the potential for kids to be eating loads of. So I think there's going to be some concerns around that. I don't doubt that over time we're going to get a number of edible products included in this, but I think that to start with, the likelihood is that more supplement style products are going to get through novel food approval. Another thing, and this is not a very popular view, but I think that isolate products are also more likely to be seen as lower risk products compared to broad spectrum products. Particularly when you're looking at botanical products, the stability of these products may be of some concern. I'm sure that there will be plenty of interactors that can convince government scientists that these are safe products, but I still think that isolate products are going to potentially get through the process sooner. And I think that just reflects then what we've got here in terms of market size. So we think that oils and capsules are going to replace one another. We think capsules are going to come through much stronger as a better format, more convenient for consumers. And particularly if it is an isolate focused market that's focused on supplements, we think capsules will really grow. So that's our market size estimates in the UK. You can see this light green line overtaking and really replacing the the oils line, which is currently very dominant if you look at 2021. We've got topicals both growing, so topicals and cosmetics really growing, and then we've got vape and this last line is kind of edible products, so kind of chocolate bars and so on. We've got a bit low. We're maybe a bit negative on this, and I think we've revised these numbers relatively recently. Finish up. So what's coming over the horizon? So I think that we're going to spend this year getting more and more clarity over novel food. So we're recording this at the end of April. We're at about 40 products that have got through the validation phase of the FSA novel food process. We're going to see more and more of these come through every week, and we're going to start to see a pattern emerge, I hope. But important to point out, validation is not an indication of whether or not companies going to or products can get through the novel food approval. So we will start to get this happen. I think we're going to start to see enforcement and consolidation, as I talked about, and that will be probably a good thing for consumers, and ultimately, I think, good thing for companies that have invested in a novel food process. I mentioned this, I think, but the novel food process in the UK is likely to kickstart the speeding up of novel food approvals in Europe, and we think that that's going to come through. We've got various regulatory issues that I talked about at the start of the presentation that are going to continue to have impacts on CBD. In the US, we've got this Delta 8 thing. I think that's the topic for this year, for 21, is what's going to happen to Delta 8. Will it continue? I know lots in the industry are really against it because they're concerned, quite rightly, that it's a potential PR disaster. Then we've got some international stuff happening. So China's recently brought in a ban on CBD in cosmetics. They look like they're going to be further restricting CBD in the domestic market, but for sure we're going to see China and other markets, Latin American markets, particularly Colombia, grow in terms of supply on the wholesale side. So that's continuing. We're seeing lots of Colombian companies that are producing product. I don't think we're going to see a decline in the glut of hemp right now, but it's going to level out, I think. So we're going to start to see some leveling out of this price decline. And then final point, I think we're going to see more and more consumer segments that are becoming very niche, very specific. We saw just very recently, Colgate have applied for patent protection for some CBD in toothpaste. I think we're going to see some of these products come through, which are really niche and really interesting. And we're going to start to see CBD less as a topic in its own right, but also just an ingredient in various different products. So I think the future is bright, and we're very focused on that. And I think I want to leave everyone with an upbeat thought that this sector is now going to grow in a much more controlled way, and I think we're very positive about it. If anyone wants these slides, then please email me. I've got my details here. Or I think what's very important to point out is that if you've got any questions, I'm going to be online when this is shown, and if you can put them through the networking platform, then I can answer them at the end of this presentation. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for inviting me. Hope the rest of the conference goes well. Thanks. Bye.